Tonight, the unstoppable force of Thomas Pynchon's whimsy comes up against the immovable object of Paul Thomas Anderson's filmmaking precision, one battle after another. Yeah, hello there. You may recall that old conceit in Star Trek, where the transporter accident, where people were split at the moment of transportation into two separate sides of their personality. And it seemed to me that watching one battle after another, Paul Thomas Anderson's very loose adaptation of Thomas Pynchon's Vineland, it was a little bit like watching the two sides of Russell Brand fight it out for 2 hours and 40 minutes. You remember that Russell used to be a sort of performative lefty. Let's have a revolution with the cunning of a weasel.
Let me tell you, they've got enough of a voice. The BBC gives enough of a voice to conventional wisdom. I'm here to give a voice to ordinary people like that.
But then he changed his mind, didn't he? Around the time that it was suggested that he might be a serial rapist. And then he found God, and suddenly he became a sort of ultra-right-wing Trumpian apologist.
What an extraordinary political figure he is.
And one could say that even though Russell Brand is, ostensibly English, and we've sort of deported him to America, his old personality and his new personality are kind of reminiscent of the American political divide as it now exists. And, he's not the only person who's made that transition. Graham Linehan, he's another one. He used to be part of the left-wing comedy establishment until he discovered that establishment was intolerant of his reactionary and wholly disingenuous views on trans people, at which time he became right-wing because he found that everybody on the right wing of the spectrum agreed with him. There's a certain comfort being on the right, isn't there? There's a certain simplicity in those views because you can pretend that the world is simple and the world is white, and therefore anything that isn't white and isn't Western should be annihilated.
Stop crying, you snivelling air. Stop your nonsense.
So what's all this got to do with Paul Thomas Anderson? Well, the thing is, one battle after another, in some respects, encapsulates that political landscape. It's a film about the factions in America, which aren't new factions, they're old factions. They stem from the civil rights struggles of the 1960s and that sort of reactionary conservatism that sprung out of that and then metastasized and became what today is sort of MAGA republicanism, this kind of ridiculous fantasy, nostalgia-tinged version of Americana, which seeks to wipe out the last 50 years of progressive change in the United States. And then that's one side of the equation. On the other side of the equation, you have the romantics, the Battle of Algiers lot, the people who grew up with posters of Che Guevara on their wall and talked about revolutionary politics, and we're going to sock it to the man, and we're going to, blow up the banks and wipe out the credit record and all this. You saw it in Sneakers in 1992. The idea everybody's equal. And, of course, Robert Redford, as we know in that movie, had become, unfortunately, indoctrinated to believe that the status quo was the mature form of politics, and therefore he considered Ben Kingsley to be the villain of the piece. Extraordinary, really.
I might even be able to crash the whole damn system. Destroy all records of ownership. Think of it, Marty. No more rich people, no more poor people. Everybody's the same. Isn't that what we said we always wanted?
Because you haven't gone crazy on me, have you?
Who else is going to change the world, Marty? Greenpeace?
You are crazy.
But yes, that's the landscape that we're dealing with in One Battle After Another. It's not set in the 80s like Pynchon's Vineland. It's set today. And initially you think, is this going to be politically relevant? It's not a period piece. But it's the fact it isn't a period piece. It gives it its power, because it is a film about 2025, an astonishingly pertinent and up-to-date film about 2025. It's hard to think of a film that sort of better captures the mood of America as it is at the moment. That extreme polarization, a sense of a country not just divided and discontent with itself, but with various factions, none of whom believe the status quo is correct. Nobody thinks that the United States, as it currently is worth preserving. Everybody wants to change it in some way. They just can't agree on how to change it. And this kind of strange, and it has to be said, sort of adolescent impulse to look at every institution and every aspect of the country's social makeup and say, no, that's wrong, that must be ripped up, or if you're on the right, rolled back. That is symptomatic of what's going on today.
We both used to think that this country was a very special place.
You don't know what I used to.
Oh, but you know about me? Do you have any idea what I've done for God and country? Some pretty fucking horrible things. I don't even remember who I was before they sunk their claws into me.
That made you into a real monster,
That's right.
And now they want to destroy me because we can't have monsters roaming the quiet countryside now, can we?
It's a strange movie that mixes sort of comic absurdism with very well staged action. It's a chase movie that's made with great precision and with terrific pace. And it has a certain perverse energy to it. It's a strange movie tonally, because on one hand you have elements of that Pynchonian whimsy, that flight of fancy, characters with very, very silly names in very unusual situations. But this is not a straight adaptation of Vineland. Anderson's not interested in that. He knows that he couldn't film that. Instead, what he's done is he's pared it down to the key themes that he finds interesting and the key character dynamics that he's found interesting. And he's fashioned essentially a news story, which is an echo of the novel without being a straight adaptation of the novel. So the credit that Pynchon gets, which is inspired by the novel Vineland, is the correct credit. And that's a good thing, incidentally, because it means that the novel and the film stand alone. They're two distinct things. And so they should be. Why is it that most filmmakers think that they should treat source material with a certain deference? Otherwise, people will be angry or upset, all the rest of it. It doesn't need to be a straight copy of a novel story, does there? You already have the novel. You've already got it. Don't need it repeated. What a superior idea it is to take elements of a story that inspired you, things that you like, or character or story ideas that you found interesting, and spin it off and create your own work. And that's what Anderson's done. And a lot more filmmakers should follow that example, I think. We get a much more interesting, if you like, synergized media, because, you know, you may watch this movie and it may lead you to Vineland, and Vineland in turn will lead you to other Pynchon novels and so on. May lead you back to Paul Thomas Anderson's adaptation of Inherent Vice and so on. So it's a lovely little rabbit hole to go down. And of course, there's plenty in this movie, one battle after another, to explore. The 60s counterculture that Thomas Pynchon's novel was based on. That's well worth exploring. It's also worth exploring recent political history to see how that dynamic has flipped. We used to think of counterculture as a left-wing concern. But of course, these days it's become a right-wing concern, hasn't it? And that's interesting. And this movie, again, captures that. It's an attempt by the white supremacists and the ultra-right-wingers in this film to silence and expunge those remnants of the left-wing counterculture that are still active and have been forced underground by the predominance of right-wing politics in the US. And so One Battle After Another is not a conventional chase movie. It's far more interesting than that. It's dominated by a strange and sort of manic performance by Leonardo DiCaprio, who's sort of playing a mixture of the dude from The Big Lebowski and Basil Fawlty. And then you've got the newcomer, who's got a strange Pynchonian name, like, I think it's Charity Iristobolis, Charity Oregano. Something like that. Sweet Charity. Anyway, the irony is her name could be her character name. But it's not. Ironically, her character's got a fairly sensible name. But she doesn't. As is typical with Pynchon, it does seem a little bit offbeat and a little bit whimsical. As is typical with Paul Thomas Anderson, the filmmaking is precise, metafictive, grandiose, and highly memorable. Johnny Greenwood contributes a score which is sort of, in part, offbeat and strange, but also slightly sinister. Those adjectives actively describe the film, I think. So, is it worth going to see? Yes, of course it is. It won't be to everybody's taste. Naturally, depending on which side of the political spectrum you're on, you're going to pick and choose your heroes and villains in this one. That said, if you identify with Sean Penn's Colonel Lockjaw, you really need your head tested. But that said, it is an equal opportunities satire, which I think has a lot to say, really, about the intellectual void and soullessness that's kind of at the heart of modern-day America. it captures that very, very well. It's sad in a sense, because what you're left with is this feeling that there's nothing new under the sun. There are no new ideas. Nobody really has any idea how to move things forward. And we're as far from consensus or a sensible middle ground as we've ever been. One battle after another certainly has no idea how to resolve that conflict. The tragedy in the case of this movie is that you have a generation that are fighting the same battles as their predecessors, but are no closer, alas, to a resolution or indeed a revolution. Until next time, I'm Dr. Macclevoid, it's not my real name. And remember, reviews like this are rare, so don't have nightmares.
God has smiled upon you this day, the fate of a nation in your hands, and blessed be the children we who fight with all our bravery till only the righteous stand. You see the distant flames, they bellow in the night. You fight in all our names for what we know is right. And when you all get shot and cannot carry on, though you die, la resistance lives on. You may stand in a head with a dagger or a sword. You may be burned to death or skinned alive or worse. But when they torture you, you will not feel the need to run, for though you die, la resistance lives on.